The phone rang on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen getting dinner ready. I had lifted the pot lid to check the broth. And my mind was turning over the usual things. My daughter's homework, tomorrow's schedule, the grocery list. I kept forgetting to write down. The number on the screen was an unfamiliar area code. Any other day, I would have let it go. Spam, I would have thought. But that afternoon, my finger moved on its own. Hello? A brief silence followed. Then came the voice of an older man. Careful, trembling, quiet in the way of someone who had been rehearsing what to say for a very long time. Is this his daughter? Your father, he wants to hear your voice. I froze where I stood. The pot kept boiling. Sunlight still came through the window. The world went on turning as if nothing had changed. But I felt 30 years come pouring down on me all at once. From those few words, Father, that word knocked against something deep inside my chest. A door I had believed locked for good. For a long moment, I couldn't say anything at all. The last time I saw my father, I was 12 years old. It was a winter evening. I remember that night with painful clarity. He pushed through the front door and walked out without looking back. My mother had sunk to the kitchen floor, crying, and I was watching through the crack in my bedroom door, holding my breath. Even as a child, I understood. This time was different. This time, he wasn't coming back. My father drank. Not every day, but on the nights that he did, the air inside our home changed. I learned to retreat to my room the moment I heard his key in the lock. If I kept still and quiet, morning would come as if nothing had happened. My mother would set the breakfast table the next day without a word. And I grew up believing that becoming an adult meant learning to pretend certain things didn't exist. But that winter night was different. I can't recall exactly what was said between them. Voices rose and fell, and at some point, there was the sound of something breaking. Then the door swung open, cold air rushed in, and my father's silhouette disappeared into the dark. That was the end. He didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. My mother never brought him up, and I never asked. We both seemed to understand, without saying so, that the door had closed. That speaking of it meant pulling the pain back out. So we didn't. My mother was a strong woman. She opened a small hair salon and left early and came home late. Her hands cracked in the cold and her feet ached. But I never once heard her blame my father. I grew up watching her, moving forward instead of looking back, holding on instead of falling apart. That was what she taught me, without ever saying a word. I decided to forget my father. No, not forget. Erase. Push him to the very back of the drawer. Lock it, and throw away the key somewhere I'd never find it again. That was the best I could do at 12 years old. Getting used to a life without him hurt less than missing him. Time passed. I finished high school, went to college, found work. I rented a small apartment not far from my mother's place and had dinner with her on weekends. In those years I told myself I was doing just fine. I could build a full life without a father. The past was the past. I repeated that to myself often enough that I almost believed it. I got married at 28. My husband was a quiet, steady man. He never raised his voice, and he never broke a promise. At first I thought that was simply how people were. But over time, I came to understand. I had been looking for someone like him. Someone who was everything my father wasn't. That was love, but it was also fear. Then our daughter was born. We named her Sophie. The day she arrived, I understood for the first time what it meant for a human being to enter the world in complete helplessness. She had no say in any of it. Who her parents would be, what her home would feel like, what she would carry with her. That thought sat heavily on me. Because I hadn't had a say either. Sophie was 5 when it happened. The moment I still remember clearly. She came running in from preschool, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Dropping her backpack on the floor. "Mommy, today the teacher said to draw our family. I drew you and Daddy." She paused for just a second. "But my friends drew grandmas and grandpas too." Then she looked up at me and asked, simply and without any weight behind it, "Mommy, why don't we have a grandpa on your side?" I didn't have an answer. "He lives far away," I managed, but Sophie was 5 and relentless. "How far? Why doesn't he come?" I laughed it off and changed the subject. But that night, after I put her to bed, I sat alone in the living room for a long time. Why don't we have one? Such a simple question. I knew why, but I had no idea how to explain it. To Sophie, or to myself. That locked drawer shifted slightly, rattled by a small girl's voice asking something she didn't even know was difficult. After that, I went on with my life as usual. But certain moments had a way of finding me. The afternoon of Sophie's school recital. When I watched other children hand bouquets to their grandfathers. Holidays when my husband's whole family filled a table. And I sat among them, quietly outside of it. Late nights with old photo albums. Each time, I looked away quickly. I didn't want to face what I was feeling. Was it grief? Longing? Or the anger that had never really left? I had been avoiding that answer for a very long time. The call came on one of those quiet ordinary afternoons. The man on the other end introduced himself as someone who knew my father. He spoke calmly. My father's health had declined, he said. He had been struggling for several months. Recently, he could barely get around on his own. And then, in a lower voice, he added, "He's been saying for a long time that he wants to see you." Just once. I ended the call. I stood there for a while afterward with the phone still in my hand. The pot had boiled over. Broth was running down the side of the stove onto the kitchen floor. I wiped it up and told myself it doesn't matter. It's been 30 years. He walked out. He never called, never wrote, never looked back. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next night either, or the one after that. My husband noticed something was off and asked gently. But I told him I was fine. Food had no taste. I couldn't focus at work. The man's words kept circling in my mind. He wants to hear your voice. He wants to see you. Just once. On the third night, I stood in the hallway outside Sophie's room for a long time. She didn't know any of this. She didn't know that somewhere, her grandfather was ill and waiting. She didn't know that I was aware of it and doing nothing. I looked at her sleeping face. And asked myself something I hadn't been able to shake. If I didn't go, and he died before I could I carry that for the rest of my life? That question broke through something in me. I bought the plane ticket. My hands were unsteady as I packed. I didn't know what to bring. I couldn't picture what he would look like. What the room would be like, what I would say when I got there. I packed a few things mechanically. Zipped the bag, and tried not to think too hard about any of it. My husband drove me to the airport. We barely spoke on the way. When he pulled up to the departure's entrance, he said quietly, "Come home without regrets." I nodded and turned away. On the plane, I watched the clouds through the window. The light falling over them was beautiful, but I felt none of it. I had one thought, and only one. What do I say when I see him? I wasn't ready to forgive. I had no warmth to offer, no longing, no expectation. All I had was the one question that had been sitting in my chest for 30 years, waiting. Why now? And I had no idea that the answer would change everything. The story continues in part 2. If you'd like to stay with us for the rest of this journey, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening.